Welcome into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Brian Perroni. We are just over a week away from the early signing period and a lot to get to. It's been a busy 7 days for Texas A&M with 3 commitments in the past week. But want to start off by just extending our condolences to Mike Leach, his family, the entire Mississippi State community. Just a tremendous loss for college football as a whole, and a guy that you're kind of seeing the widespread impact that he made on a lot of people. So keeping everybody involved there in our thoughts moving forward. Brian, how you doing?
Oh, doing well. I mean, like you said, there's been a number of commitments, which hadn't happened for about 2 months. I know we talked about Ruben Owens last week,
Yep.
and we'll get to a couple more this week. And yeah, you mentioned Mike Leach. I mean, I've been watching him going back to my days as a student at A&M. I think it was my freshman year. Oklahoma wasn't even really that good. They weren't the powerhouse. John Blake had just, Bob Stoops had just come up for John Blake. And Oklahoma comes out and, A&M's favored, and Oklahoma gets basically 3 wide receivers on each side of the field, and A&M had no clue what to do. I think it ended up 55-14 or something. That was, man, this is going to date me a little bit. That was back in the day. There was no games. Not all games were on TV. So I think that one was actually on the radio. I think I may have been listening to it, been like, what is going on? And that was the first time anybody, at A&M at least, knew about Mike Leach. And yeah, that offense was tough to stop. A&M fans just remember him at Texas Tech. He had a way of beating A&M. I mean, he's, when he went to Mississippi State, it's like, why this guy again? He just had A&M's number. So, but yeah, and obviously just a fun interview, a guy that was really entertaining, and I can't even imagine what his family's going through with, just this happening so suddenly. So, like you said, our well wishes and prayers to his family and the whole Mississippi State community.
No question. He was one of the guys I made sure to watch as many of his interviews as I possibly could, because like he even said, he never knew what's going to come out of his mouth. It could be anything, and he had an opinion on everything. Cracked me up as well when he kind of went to the SEC media days this week or this year, and they asked him why he didn't have an opening statement, and he said, well, because media aren't going to ask me about my opening statement anyway, so why bother? Why bother with an opening statement if nobody's going to ask me about it anyway? You guys could just get your questions you really want to ask me. And I think that kind of sums up how he kind of was. It was just honest. It was just true as can be, and just a tremendous loss. So definitely keeping everybody around the Mississippi State community in our thoughts. Looking back and on the recruiting trail for A&M, as we mentioned, it's been a busy week to catch everybody up. A&M last week, in what came together very quickly on Wednesday, landed a commitment from Ruben Owens, 5-star running back out of El Campo, the top-rated running back in the country. But they weren't done there. On Sunday night, landed a commitment in the 2024 class from 4-star receiver DeBron Gatling, who is a former teammate of LT Overton. So those two are obviously very close, and a guy that A&M was the first school to offer him. He's developed close relationships with Damian Craig, James Coley, and the rest of the staff, and spoke at length about the respect that he and his family have for that A&M coaching staff. And then I think the most interesting one, and one we can kind of dive into today, is Rylan Kennedy. He's got just a fascinating story. Picked up an offer from Texas A&M last week. Took an official visit this past week, and it was on the commitment list Monday night. Brian, your impressions of what you've seen from him, just diving into film.
Yeah, so this is the guy that is, I mean, we talked about it off the air, but this is a guy that's new to football. He played in junior high, but that's not really the same thing. And rusty for 3 years, so just decided to go out and play his senior year. Was a basketball player, and impressed enough that he started picking up offers. Let's see, he didn't have a single offer until mid-November, I think it was, early November, and then he got a couple Pac-12 on the same day with Washington and Cal, USC a couple of days later, Auburn, Texas, and then A&M offered last week. So this is a guy that had just sort of a meteoric rise. And you can see why watching this film. He's really quick off the line. Um, you know, he's hard to block. He comes a lot of times he lines up in that wide nine technique all the way out, and the tackles just don't know what to do. I mean, he's too quick if he gets a head start. So, I see him coming to A&M and being maybe a little bit like we saw Eni White play this year.
Yeah.
Bit of linebacker, bit of end, just sort of edge, and that's what A&M is recruiting him at, as an edge, and sort of figure out the exact role later. But he's probably athletic enough even to play just pure outside backer if he wanted to. So good pickup. Will probably be a guy that needs a little time in the weight room, needs a little time just to really continue to learn the game, but has a chance to be really good.
No, the great question. I had a chance to actually see him earlier this year when Lake Ridge played Duncanville, and obviously Duncanville overmatches Lake Ridge when it comes to from a talent perspective, and the game was over pretty quickly. But the impact that Ryland Kennedy was able to have, at least early in the game, getting after the path, getting after the quarterback, and showing some of that explosive athleticism off the edge, wasn't really on the radar at that point. Was a guy that I think a lot of people would describe him as a late bloomer. But just really good athleticism, explosive, twitchy off the edge. And like you said, I think he could fit kind of that Eni White role and does fill a position of need for A&M, as even if he needs a year or two in the strength and conditioning program. I think that's a group that A&M needs to continue to add depth to at the weak side edge rusher position. So just, and from an A&M perspective, you add a piece that you can continue to develop, and they're continuing to kind of rise up in the rankings as well, up to number 17, jumped Florida State. And, I think this is an example. They're going to continue to close on some guys late in the cycle. They're bringing in more guys this weekend. Jaden Platt, Tony Mitchell, Marshall Reed are a couple of the notable names. Hayden Moore as well, a linebacker.
Yeah,
He's committed to
all
Nebraska.
4 of those guys they're looking to flip. So it's impressive. They're getting not just big targets, but committed targets on campus for that final weekend.
No question, and there's kind of a big need for all of those guys, I would say. I mean, Tony Mitchell, when you look at the secondary with the guys that have left in the transfer portal this year, he's got a chance to come in and really make an impact early in the secondary, whether it's at safety or corner. We've seen A&M kind of be able to plug these guys in and play them early on. Where do you, somebody asked last week on the board, where do you see him as the best fit, or what do you kind of see as the profile for Tony Mitchell?
Okay, so I mean, he's a guy who plays cornerback in high school, also plays some safety.
Mm-hmm.
Good player, can actually line up at either spot, I think. But really, with him being good in coverage, but also a bigger guy already, I think probably safety would be his best bet.
Yeah.
I know A&M just wants to get him on campus, get him signed and figure that out later. But I think we saw with Jalen Jones. Now, Jalen Jones is a good player, but it's really hard for sort of those bigger guys that aren't necessarily the best at change of direction. I mean, Jalen Jones is really good. I don't mean to, he was a freshman All-American. Don't mean to take that away from him, but when you're already that size coming out of high school, it's just not incredibly natural to play cornerback. So if you get a safety back there can cover, like Antonio Johnson, I mean, that was more the nickel, but still, if you get a safety that can cover, I mean, you have a really valuable player. I mean, that's what Bryce Anderson is going to do in Johnson's stead going forward. And Bryce was a guy that some schools recruited at corner. So, I really like Mitchell at safety. But if he does stay at corner, I think he has a chance to be a good one there as well.
No question. And Hayden Moore to me is kind of a name that maybe flies a little bit under the radar, but he's emerging as more and more of an important target for A&M. Obviously, there's been some departures in that room of the past week or so with Andre White, Terrion Lee, Ish Harris. Depth is a little bit low there, and was a position we talked about coming into the cycle that, Anthony Hill's obviously a huge need heading down the final week. Looks to be a battle between Texas and Texas A&M for him. But Hayden Moore is a guy, you just need depth and bodies at that position as well. And they're obviously bringing in Mason Cobb this weekend. He confirmed with us an Oklahoma State linebacker transfer that, has been extremely productive the past couple of years at Oklahoma State. But I think a guy like him is becoming increasingly more important with some of the departures this offseason.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, A&M doesn't really have that true Mike either. I mean, Chris
Mm-hmm.
Russell's, a bigger guy, but Edgerrin Cooper's been playing a bit out of position at Mike. So if you get, all the guys that you mentioned, Oklahoma State, he's a Mike linebacker. Hayden Moore is a Mike linebacker. Anthony Hill is a Mike. So if you get those guys in, I mean, that does a huge deal with not just depth, but really immediate playing time for all those guys. And Damian Sanford, he plays actually all over the place for Pato, but probably
Yeah.
more of an outside guy. And but really, if you look at the depth chart, A&M only has 3 linebackers coming back that are scholarship.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know if there'll be a new DC. If there is, then maybe it's a different system. And if they run 3 linebackers, well, then you definitely need more than 3 total
More
on the
than 3,
roster.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a pretty big. I'd say actually probably the biggest position of need. I know everybody wants A&M to go out and get an offensive tackle or several of them, but really the immediate need is linebacker, if for nothing else in depth. I mean, it's sort of scary what the depth chart looks like because Andre White and Terry and Lee, you sort of thought they'd remain around. Even they weren't necessarily stars, but you thought they'd be around. So yeah, they have to replace those guys somewhere.
And it was a glaring issue that showed up last year as well, that linebacker depth and those issues kind of showed up in the run game as well. And so, to me, whether it's the transfer portal, whether it's high school recruiting, that's an area that's got to get figured out. And Hayden Moore and Mason Cobb are 2 of the bigger targets, I think, out there. And Jaden Platt, I think, is another interesting name because this time last year, A&M appeared to kind of be the favorite to land Jaden Platt. And then the way things worked out with A&M taking 3 tight ends in the last cycle with Donovan Green, Jake Johnson, and Theodore Mellon-Ostrom, there was a thought entering the year that maybe A&M wasn't going to sign a tight end in this class. And so Jaden Platt commits to Stanford, David Shaw retires, and now suddenly late in the cycle, A&M and Florida are very much in the mix for Jaden Platt. I know on the floor from the Florida side, Jaden Platt's a huge need because they've had several departures from their 2021 class, and so there's an opportunity for Jaden Platt to come in and play immediately there. But from an A&M perspective as well, I think tight end kind of still sits as a need. Donovan Green was a guy that obviously stepped up as a consistent performer this year, but didn't see a ton from Jake Johnson and Theodore Mellon-Ostrom. And so, with Blake Smith departing this offseason to the transfer portal, Jaden Platt's an intriguing late target. I think that certainly deserves a look for A&M.
Oh yeah, and he's a guy that A&M absolutely loved at camp. I mean, you and I were there. You could just tell how much them talking to him, them reacting to every single thing he did, his 40, his his all the routes and everything. I mean, they're just sort of going nuts on that. So he's a guy they loved. I think, man, when he committed, I think we might have even had quotes from him for a pre-write, sort of A&M. For A&M sort of decided to go in that different direction. And what's funny is Florida's the same way. Florida signed 3 tight ends in the 2022 class and, was not looking to sign one this year, but now they're back in too. So I think he understands where, the position they were in, but he also, I mean, it's hard to get a kid to decommit from Stanford. I mean, Stanford's a really good school.
Yeah.
Kids that commit there are very serious about their academics, and so they're really looking forward to going to school there as well. Yeah. But A&M is a good school, really good school. He could stay in the state of Texas, and A&M has a history of, producing All-American tight ends. It's just, they have under Jimbo Fisher. So I think the Aggies are really going to give him, a hard choice after this weekend, and after Jimbo Fisher visits and things like that. So yeah, he'll be fun to watch. And I think he, there's a good chance he ends up in the class and he'll really fit in that roster. Cause like you said, Theo Orstrom didn't play this year. He's, came from Europe and is still really adjusting to the game. And then Jake Johnson was hurt. So, it's really wide open after Donovan Green, for him to get in there. And he's a good blocker too, which, Green's a good blocker, but not really the biggest guy. I think Platt has a bigger frame than him. Jake Johnson also not really the biggest guy. And Theo Orstrom, same thing. So, Platt could be a, immediate impact in the run game.
No doubt. And, I think A&M took a positive step forward from talking to people around his recruitment after the in-home last week. They had some questions for A&M about the direction the program was heading, tight end room, some of the other aspects of the program, and from what I gathered, the A&M staff did a good job kind of answering a lot of those questions and kind of clearing up everything the Platt family was wondering about. So, I think it's a positive step forward, and you're right. I think heading this weekend, there's a chance to spend more time with Jimbo Fisher, with James Coley, and the rest of the staff. I think A&M is certainly in a position to close and to be able to stress that area of need and that area of importance that he'd be able to come in and compete for playing time right away. Like I mentioned, the early signing period gets underway a week from Wednesday, and
tomorrow.
a week from Wednesday, and an interesting wrinkle this year we'll get to after the break as well. When it comes to the Texas high school football playoffs and the early signing period coming up, we'll take a look at more at that right after a quick break. Welcome back into the GigEm247 Sports Podcast. I am Andrew Hattersley, joined by Brian Perroni. Brian, bit of an interesting scheduling quirk, I think, this year.
Yeah.
Whenever the past couple of years, the state championships have always come after the early signing period, and this year it's going to come right in the middle of a contact period. Just want to get your thoughts. So, what do you think that's going to be like? Do you think we will see a lot of coaches out at the out at AT&T Stadium this weekend, and as they prepare to head out on the road, and what difference do you think that'll have on the last couple of days of this recruiting cycle?
I honestly hadn't even thought of that.
Matt, shout out to Matt Stepp. That I saw a tweet from him this week and thought, man, we're going to see a lot of. My instinct is we're going to see a lot of coaches out on the sideline for the state championship games, and that's not something that's traditionally happened, but it's certainly an interesting way it worked out.
No, for sure. I hadn't really thought of that because last year and years prior, it's been signing day has been before. I mean, if you remember last year, Denver Harris had signed on Wednesday, but committed to A&M publicly after North Shore won the state title on that Saturday.
Basically, on the field, his brother hit publish.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I don't think he even knew that he had announced his commitment yet. It was because I think somebody was like, "How do you know he committed?" Like I'm watching on TV, and like, well, one, obviously we knew it was coming, but two, it's like it's live now. Somebody hit it, so
somebody.
So yeah, but so the thing is though, the rules they get so crazy. So a head coach is allowed one visit total for each recruit. And then the assistants are allowed two total, but only one per week. So if they've already used, if a coach has already used his visit, say to South Oak Cliff or to, man, I need to look at the things, to DeSoto or somewhere, then they actually can't come. But and if you did want to do an in-home, you have to do it that same day. So if a coach, let's say, goes, on Friday night to see South Oak Cliff, well, he's got to go by the school or go by the house earlier or later that day to maximize that. So that could throw a wrinkle. But yeah, I think there are going to be a ton of coaches. I mean, I was at Energy Stadium a couple weeks ago for the Silsbee game against Cuero, and there were a number of college coaches there too. So yeah, this is that time, and I mean, a lot of them will be on campus over the weekend hosting visitors. But shoot, I guarantee TCU will have their full allotment of 9 or 10 guys out there. SMU as well. I mean, why wouldn't you? If you can go out. Plus, it's a chance for them to catch up, and it's just fun to watch. I love the Texas high school playoffs. I think there's nothing like it in sports, and that weekend with 12 games, 12 games in 4 days. I mean, is awesome.
And you and I have talked about this off air, but it's always funny to kind of see these coaches, they obviously head on the road knowing that they have a job to do, that they're to see a kid, but there's always kind of a clump. They're always kind of in the same clump, kind of catching up with each other as well.
Yeah, oh
And
yeah,
last Friday night at that, you mentioned that South Oak Cliff game. Tommy Robinson and TJ Rushing were both out there amongst a ton of coaches. I think I've seen Emmett Jones out at 4 or 5 games the past 2 weeks. Like it seems like he's kind of been everywhere, and so you kind of see the same coaches kind of pop up again and again, and
oh yeah,
in their areas, and so I do expect there to be a lot of coaches. You mentioned that that's the other wrinkle too, about especially the Saturday with the 6A games being on Saturday. You've got schools that are going to be worrying about hosting visitors as well, and then these games going on during the day and into the night. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all works out. I think it's good. I think it might even help a couple kids from smaller schools start to see their recruitments pick up with the games beginning earlier in the week. So I think it'll work out well overall. And looking ahead to this close, I think one of the interesting storylines to watch, A&M is still in pursuit of several quarterbacks
yeah.
in this 2023 class. Marcel Reed um, is one. There's a couple though. Miles Jackson, who just committed to Stanford last week, but it's
And
certainly a
and
guy
I
that,
don't necessarily see it happening, but I mean, Austin
yeah,
Novosad is a guy that A&M is
awesome,
still after as well. I mean,
yeah,
they're kicking, they're trying to look under every rock and go after every guy. So, and
yep.
he had been a long time target, so he's another guy that they're still after.
Yep, he was the next guy I was mentioned that they're just going to keep
Yeah,
kicking the tires on these guys and see where they land at the early signing period. Obviously, you mentioned getting Marcel Reed in for an official visit right before the early signing period. I think is certainly encouraging. I mentioned coming out of his last visit that A&M had really put a good foot forward, and there's confidence around the Ole Miss. Uh, Around Oxford and around the Ole Miss program that he will sign next Wednesday. But I got to be honest, I mean, he's taken back-to-back visits the past 2 weeks to Auburn and Texas A&M on
yeah.
official visits. The door is at least slightly open in terms of them taking a closer look at some of these programs, and if he was completely solid, he'd be going back to Oxford this weekend for the final weekend before Ole Miss.
Oh
So
yeah.
before their signing period. So he's at least giving another look to Texas A&M, and I think this all started with that LSU game and getting that victory and being able to spend time with the coaching staff. They've obviously Damon Craig's been out to see him on the recruiting trail, and now it's a chance for Texas A&M to get him back in right before the early signing period and be able to close it out.
Oh yeah, I mean, so Lane Kiffin, Lane Kiffin's flirting with flirtations with Auburn got him a ton of money, so he doesn't regret that. He did
Yeah.
everything well, but one of the side effects was that Marcel Reed took that trip to A&M for the LSU game. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he wasn't really, he was sort of off the radar, and then as his coach looks like he might be leaving for another school, so it's like, oh, I got to keep my options open. Well, then A&M goes out and beats a top 10 team, top 10 at the time. They should not have been
Yeah.
top 10. Sorry, LSU. We said it then. We'll say it now. They weren't a
Yeah.
bad program, but not a top 10 team. But yeah, A&M comes and beats a top 10 team at home. It's a really crazy loud night game at Cal Field. The offense actually looks good for the most part. Yeah, so, Lane Kiffin caused that to happen. If they lose Marcel Reed, I mean, it really is directly from that flirtation with Auburn. Now,
Mm-hmm.
again, he's extra rich now, so he doesn't regret that. He can get
Yeah.
himself another QB, But Marcel Reed, if he goes on to become a Heisman winner and a #1 draft pick, it's your fault, Lane. It's your fault.
It's your fault. And how about the entertainment? Let's take a step back for a minute. And I'm just looking at this from the Auburn Ole Miss perspective. Hugh Freeze comes in, and who's the first target he goes after
Yeah, I
on the
know, right?
quarterback trail is Ole Miss's quarterback commit, and goes right after him to get him on campus for an official visit. I'm all here for all that. That was certainly an entertaining storyline, and got to touch on more on Tony Mitchell as well. Obviously, he's a guy that's been down to Texas A&M a ton of times at this point. Coming back for his official visit, I know he's a guy that you've gotten to know well over the past couple of years. What chances do you give A&M in terms of a flip right before the early signing period?
All right, so Tony Mitchell lives almost down the street from Tuscaloosa, from Alabama, where he's committed. I mean, it's what, probably 30 minutes from Alabaster to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
Um, but and it was still a bit surprising though when he decided to make his commitment. I think Alabama really pushed, and
hmm
they have the number one class right now, and it's like, hey, it was filling up, things like that. So hey, get on board. But even right after committing, he still took a visit to A&M not long after that, and unofficially, he's been numerous times since. So it's a very real shot. I mean, I know he really likes the Aggies. He likes the commitments in the class and the guys on campus. And if you live in the state of Alabama, if you live down the street from Tuscaloosa, and you are going to decommit from Bama, you're not going to do so until signing day because you don't want to
yeah,
get all that pressure and everything from the fans. So I don't think we'll hear anything this weekend, but I do think there's a very legitimate shot. I don't want to put odds on it or anything like that, but
yeah.
it's a very real shot of A&M getting them in the flip, and a lot probably depends on how how comfortable he feels this weekend and everything, but I don't see why he wouldn't because he's been so much. So yeah, that would be a big get, a 5-star, or I don't know if he's a 5-star or close. I mean, if he's not a 5-star, he's very close to that range.
Yeah.
Committed to an in-state Bama program. I mean, Nick Saban. I mean, Jimbo's just been a thorn in his side, both on the field and on the recruiting trail, and that wouldn't make him happy. So, yeah, that would be a big win for A&M for a number of reasons. For the fact that he's a good player, for just the momentum, and just really the optics of A&M stealing a recruit from Alabama after its worst season in 20 years. So
Boy, maybe the summer storylines of that would be entertaining to watch,
oh,
just
yeah,
to see what Nick Saban's reaction to that was. And A&M is going to have to play defense on a couple guys as well. But the good news is they're getting them both on campus this final weekend. And DJ Hicks and Javon Thomas, I think those are the two guys that really schools have come after the hardest the last couple of weeks. DJ Hicks is coming off a visit to Oregon. His dad told Steve Wiltfong that he still sees it as a pretty tall task for any school to really flip
yeah,
DJ Hicks. And it goes back to what we've talked about quite a bit, which is his longstanding relationships with Elijah Robinson, with this A&M staff, goes back years. Proximity to home, I think, also works very much in A&M's favor, and something we've pointed out extensively. I think it's a case. DJ is a really thoughtful. I think it's a case of him wanting to, you know, kind of get one final look, make sure he's got all the information he needs to
yeah.
make that decision. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Obviously, Oregon's been a big factor in this recruitment for a while, but I think right now signs still probably would point in A&M's favor, and it would be huge for them to hold on to him. And I think they've got a really good shot at doing so.
Oh yeah, and then his teammate and friend Damian Sanford's committed A&M.
Yeah,
Also has Oregon and Oklahoma really hard after him. But we talked earlier about the linebacker depth at A&M. I mean, it's Sanford committed to the Aggies almost immediately after being offered. I mean, it
yep,
was sort of his dream offer. So I think it helps with Hicks to have that friend and familiar face. I mean, those guys, they've only been together a year since Hicks transferred into Pato, but I think they knew each other before that, and they're close friends, and they've gone on almost all the visits together. So if A&M can keep Sanford, which it looks likely, then that'll go even further in helping to keep Hicks.
no question. And the final guy I think is Javon Thomas. Obviously, took a visit this past weekend to TCU. It was originally scheduled to be an official visit. Only ended up being an unofficial visit. He was only able to make it into town on Sunday, but still spent some time with the TCU staff, and I think they will likely follow that up with an in-home visit as well. And look, A&M's had their own in-home visit already with the assistant coaches, and we'll get him back on campus this weekend as well, for this upcoming weekend, for an official visit. Had to be careful that this upcoming weekend, based on all the discussions that have taken place on our board when it comes to but this upcoming weekend he'll be there, back in College Station, and I think that's good
Wait,
news for
this weekend or next weekend? Which
Next
one?
weekend. Next weekend.
No, that's
I'm
no,
kidding.
that's after
I'm
signing
kidding.
day.
I'm kidding. December 16th through the 18th is when
Yeah,
they're
that's easier. Just
yeah.
say the exact date, and then people are gonna say, what time is that Mountain Time? It's like,
Yeah,
I don't
what
know.
is
Yesterday, like,
Mountain Time, Pacific Time, what Australian Eastern Standard Time?
oh, we
It's
were way off on that one.
we were way off on that one.
Oh,
That was
and
admittedly
I have to admit too, I went in and edited without without telling anybody. We had been told that DeBron Gatling's announcement was at 8 p.m. Eastern because he's in Atlanta. And I was like, oh, okay. And I texted the guy. I was like, all right, cool. 9 p.m. Central. And the guy didn't say anything. And I just in my mind, I was like, yeah, 8 p.m. there, 9 p.m. Central. So
yeah.
I put that up. I think we would have been 2 hours late on his announcement. So if anybody's wondering how to get Central from Eastern time, you just subtract an hour.
Subtract,
And I
come
think,
backwards.
so I think Mountain, you subtract 3.5 hours Mountain time. So, and you'll be good to go.
You come here for the recruiting wisdom and intel, but you get time zone intel as well.
I think we're going to start a time zone podcast next. Everybody needs to listen.
Sorry, I hate to break it to you guys.
I believe in India it really is on the half hours, and that's got to be like maddening. What time is it? It's 11:30 here, and that means it's like 9 p.m. there. It's like, how does that work? Like, how does that not frustrate everybody? It's on the half hour. So sorry, that was random. We'll dive into that on the next.
Yeah, that'll be our mid-February one. We'll dive into time zones. We'll get into all different time zones. You guys
I'll explain daylight savings to people too.
We'll get into that.
No, we don't know what time it is. Like,
yeah, we got nothing for. We don't ask us what time people are signing. You might get Mountain Time, Pacific Time, Eastern Time.
I don't know.
But no, getting back to Javon Thomas, he'll be there December 16th to 18th. And I think A&M's got a good shot at keeping him as well. Obviously, getting the last word helps, and this has been his plan all along. It actually ended up being a significantly less busy December, I think, than he was originally anticipating. He talked about Texas Tech visits, Texas visits. Those didn't end up happening, but did end up making it over for the day at TCU. But A&M being able to get the last word, and I think of anybody, and beating LSU really helped with Javon Thomas, because as I've mentioned before, he kind of talked about how if you just wanted to see A&M be able to get over the hump and be able to win a game and show that they were taking steps. And so I think to be able to show that, to get it at the end of the year, and the A&M staff has made him a huge priority. They've had coaches out at these past 2 games, and recognize that they need to close strong with him. And they've certainly poured the resources into that. So I think overall, there was a lot of concern, I think, when the season finished, about how A&M was gonna finish. But we've talked about it before, this staff, and it doesn't stop here, by the way. It goes into February. Jaquan Smith is a guy that California receiver that can absolutely fly, that is planning to visit A&M in late January. And so the work doesn't necessarily stop once the early signing period, but this is obviously when the majority of the guys are going to put pen to paper and sign. And so we will certainly have you covered with all the latest over the next week. As we look ahead to big visit weekend, we'll have the latest come on next week's edition of the podcast. Kind of recapping that big weekend and looking ahead to the early signing period. But until then, have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you guys soon.